Good afternoon and welcome to Heart Rhythm TV. I'm delighted to welcome Nick Wilson, the General Manager of Ambulatory Monitoring and Diagnostics at Philips. Good afternoon, Nick. Welcome to HRX.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's great to see you here, sir. We'll dive right in. People speak a lot of the promise of artificial intelligence in cardiovascular medicine. What does that really mean to a company like Philips?
I think for Philips, it means a couple of things. First of all, how do we deliver all of this data into a workflow, right? If we can't deliver workflows to our clinicians, it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. The second big thing, and Philips is a really strong believer, is how do we make the data as transparent as possible? Part of the challenges that we have with artificial intelligence is sometimes it can be a bit of a black box, mm-hmm. right? So we want to make sure that we're bringing validated, clinically certified algorithms to our customers in that workflow. Third one is we want to make sure it's agnostic as possible. There's no way any one company can deliver all of the advances that we're seeing in artificial intelligence. So we've really taken an agnostic approach. How do we collect as much data on the front end? And then how do we enable other algorithm developers, like our partners at Anumana, to be able to deliver that in that workflow, even if it's not developed by Philips? Absolutely.
And when you're talking about data, you're talking about data from across the spectrum, right? You're talking about data from ambulatory monitors and then in-hospital data?
Absolutely. I mean, the power of AI and what feeds AI is absolutely the amount of data you can collect, right? The fidelity of that data, the purity of it. If it's already filtered, it already has stuff applied to it, you're not sure what the result's going to get. So we've really focused on how can we collect data, again, from Philips material boxes, third-party boxes, whether it's a bedside monitor, a transpo monitor, a patch that someone's wearing at home. How do you aggregate that and how do you apply the AI over that and bring it back to the clinician in their workflow so they can proceed with doing what they should be doing, which is caring about the patient, not trying to find the new data point or the new report.
Absolutely. What are the barriers that you've identified to the widespread use of AI in cardiovascular medicine?
I would say cardiovascular medicine, just generally with AI, we're probably 5 years behind radiology. I mean, if you just look at radiology for a long time has used AI for image interpretation and what have you, but we're quickly catching up. There's definitely some growth pains in that catch up though. I think first of all, a lot of the AI is what I would call detective AI, right? It detects something that would be there and you would find through a different modality like ultrasound.
Right.
That changes care pathways, changes clinical practice a little bit. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be that ramp time of how do you change the behavior when you get this new data.
Yep.
The other one is it's more data. It's more work for clinicians.
Right.
Right. Now they're not just looking at, does someone have arrhythmia? They could be looking at, does someone have arrhythmia, amyloidosis, or heart failure? Mm-hmm. So I think there's also going to be some challenges just in terms of how does the workflow adapt.
Right.
And the last one is policy and coverage.
Right.
Right. Around the world, reimbursement really drives a lot of behaviors for good or for ill. And a lot of this stuff, the technology is moving faster than policy, even in some cases the FDA can move.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There are certainly gaps in the knowing adoption and uptake of AI across the board in medicine, but including cardiology. Have you guys identified these gaps and how do we overcome them?
So I would say a new gap gets identified every day. The technology moves so fast, right? I mean, I think in our personal lives we see it. We're definitely seeing it in medicine. The biggest gaps, I think, are threefold. So one is there's a foundational understanding of how are these algorithms developed, right? What data goes into them? How do you use them to interpret? Do you understand the weaknesses and the strengths of what they look like? The second one is that we've seen, and this is the one that we really focused on, frankly, is workflow, right? They've been developed as standalone algorithms, so they're a bit piecemeal.
Right.
You have to go to a different portal. You have to go look at a different place. Mm-hmm. If it's not in the workflow, we know the clinicians aren't going to use it.
Right.
The third one is, and we were just talking with Dr. Lampert from Mount Sinai about this. There's a big education gap. Right? We don't educate clinicians. We don't educate the general populace for that matter. How do you understand the outputs of these algorithms, right? We all know how to understand a CHA2DS2-VASc score.
Right.
How do you understand an algorithm that says there's a 50% probability of someone having low ejection fraction, for instance?
Right.
So there's again, the technology is sometimes outstripping the capacity for broad adoption. But I think in general life and in medicine, it's going to quickly catch up because it's going to just be part and parcel, right? It's going to be the equivalent of using Epic or Microsoft Excel in the future, I really believe.
Absolutely. Equity and bias in AI is a big concern, and rightly so. How do you identify sources of bias in the data that you take in, and how do you ensure equitable use of AI? How do you ensure that the AI that you use treats patients equitably?
Yeah, I think this is a really important question. And I think there's two dimensions of the question around equity. There's who gets access to these advanced algorithms. And I think the second one is, how are you making sure that the algorithm is built on a representative sample, right? To start with the second one first, we strongly believe wherever possible, it can't be a black box AI, but the idea of human reinforcement learning is very critical, right? If you look at the most recent, ChatGPT and these things, they're trained off of such a volume of data. There's no way you can control for bias in the training source. You can only control for it by correcting it through the human reinforcement learning. So smaller data sets, you can make sure, and the FDA has had these rules in place for a while. If you're using PPG, or using all sorts of skin tones, for instance, which makes for a better algorithm, good science, right? More accuracy.
Absolutely.
But as we get larger, what's going to become more important is what I would call a health label for these algorithms. What was the training data set, right? What were the potential biases in that training data set? And then we have to remember, none of these should operate as an autonomous agent, right? We need to inform the clinician so they can take that as a data point with all the other data points they have and still apply their own clinical judgment. I think the second element of equity is access.
Right.
I think there's a really positive potential element of access, which is, in theory, some of these algorithms can take the knowledge of a highly advanced, sophisticated, worldwide KOL in electrophysiology and bring that algorithmically down to a primary care in North Dakota. So that could be a boon for access when we know there are more patients than we have clinicians.
Sure.
The downside is it becomes a solution for rich people, right? And I think this is going to be a really, we talk about the digital divide between rich and poor. I think there is a real risk that we're going to have to manage as a community,
right?
In terms of making sure that this makes medicine more accessible,
right?
Not more exclusive.
So that everybody can benefit. Absolutely. Speaking from Philip's point of view, what would you say are the next steps in the implementation of AI in cardiology, specifically electrophysiology?
I think particularly in electrophysiology, there's a lot of really exciting work being done at large institutions, right? Mount Sinai, Mayo is, kind of been in the vanguard of this. NYU, these academics, I think, are really starting to push the boundary, creating their own AI committees.
Right.
Researchers are going deep in pretty rapidly advancing the science around it.
Right.
What can we clinically start to use AI to detect or automate? So I think that's pretty exciting. Where from Philip's perspective, what we're really focused on is how do we get those researchers the cleanest, highest fidelity data possible? That's point one. And then the second one is, how do we close the loop so when they've developed those algorithms, we can deliver it in the cleanest, most efficient workflow possible?
Right.
So where we really focused is how do we enable the clinicians, and then how do we enable the ecosystem to connect into that workflow and feed the system, basically.
Right. Lovely. I'm going to finish with a final question, which concerns predictive analytics. I didn't warn you that this question was coming, so this is on the fly. But do you foresee that we're going to be able to use the data that you have access to in telemetry, on monitors generated from devices, to predict patient deterioration, whether that's the development of arrhythmia or just clinical deterioration on the whole? Is that something that you guys are working on at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, in the spring, we published a paper that was a forward look around predicting VTs. So, I think there's really exciting, but I would classify almost 3 dimensions of AI that are being applied. Generally speaking, there's, can I detect something that I wouldn't have detected normally, right? We see a lot of those.
Yep.
Is someone having a heart attack, a silent heart attack? Do they have low ejection fraction, et cetera? we can detect those through something else, but there's 500 million ECGs taken, so it's the cheapest, easiest way if we can reliably detect it. Then how can I predict it, right? I think there's a lot of science. We're working on some. We're focused on VTs, for instance. We're focused on arrhythmic events, right? Is someone going to have AFib in the next 30 days? Are a couple of examples of ones we're working on as a company. And then I think the other one that I'm pretty excited about is what I would call like translation AI, right? So this is kind of the equivalent of using an ECG as a written prompt to create an image. I think that's going to be a really exciting frontier. If you can start to do mapping, right, which I know some of the companies here are working on, that's reliable to accelerate, procedure planning.
Right.
That could be quite game changing.
Absolutely.
I think when you put all three of those together, you have a completely new paradigm in how you can diagnose, plan for, and treat patients.
Yeah. Really exciting time. Nick, thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. And back to you.